Hey guys, Jim Vinoski with Manufacturing Talks here. Welcome back. Look, this is a big show. I've been wanting to talk about US shipbuilding and specifically about our naval shipbuilding situation for ages and have not been able to get anyone to talk to me until now. And boy, did I hit it out of the park with finding someone to talk. So I've got US Navy Captain, retired Brent Sadler. He's now with the Heritage Foundation. He's Senior Research Fellow there, graduate of the US Naval Academy in Annapolis, was on submarines for his tour with the Navy, and just now speaks very vocally about the situation we're in, which is not good when it comes to US shipbuilding and specifically with respect to our Navy and its situation and our shortage of ships and our need to get back on track because we've got some tough times potentially coming down the road. So Brent is here to share all that with us today. And man, tune in for the whole thing because this is going to be really important. Brent's coming on right now.
Welcome to Manufacturing Talks with Jim Vinoski. Industry has a million cool stories, and Jim talks to the movers and shakers who are making them happen. Let's dive in.
All right. Hey, welcome, Brent. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Oh, very glad to have you on. I have to tell you, I've been dying to talk about shipbuilding forever, and I'm literally a decades-long fan of the Heritage Foundation. So very excited to have you here.
Thank you.
Before we dive into the meat of the subject, why don't you just give us, who you are, what your background is, how you got doing, what you're doing now.
Yeah, well, retired Navy captain, 26 years, nuke submariner. As they say, a Western Pacific sailor, Westpac sailor. So a lot of time in the Pacific and up in Northeast Asia, all the way down to Southeast Asia. So very familiar with those waters. Grew up in the same area, born in Virginia. So I'm a Virginian, but the formative years were in Guam and Tokyo, Japan. So
Oh, wow.
I'm also kind of a child of the Pacific, which is also where the shipping and the shipbuilding interest comes in for me and why I went into the Navy. And I had a grandfather who also served in World War II in the theater, was a naval attaché in Manila back in the 60s, and some interesting sea stories definitely animated a lot of my interest and trying to service into the nation.
Well, thank you for your service. Thanks for helping keep me and my family safe. I appreciate that. And again, thanks for joining up today. I'd come across one of your articles and have read a few more since then, but very clear that you've got a passion for this shipbuilding thing. And in the one article I came across in the US Naval Institute proceedings, you said, for too long, the United States has viewed its Navy as a luxury, which I thought was phenomenal. Can you tell us more about what goes into that assertion?
Yeah, so it's a riff on a letter between Winston Churchill and Jackie Fisher, who was the first Sea Lord. And in the email, they were talking, or not email, in the letter, is long before emails. Right. In the letter, Admiral Fisher was talking about armor and the importance of armor, but also speed and range of the weapons. It's the same equation that we have to deal with today. And they were getting in a debate, and he said the luxuries of today, and he was talking about speed, are going to be the necessities of the future. And he was talking about, this was before the Battle of Jutland. So this was, the big battle cruisers and battleships kind of question was resolved at that, or largely resolved. And so when I was talking about that, I was in the modern American experience, we haven't really done the due diligence, the hard work and commitment of resources to keep and maintain the Navy that we need. And we've been for too long getting by on the backs of our sailors many times, extra work, extra maintenance, extra everything on their backs. And the whole thing, the whole system is starting to break. The ships are getting too old and they're breaking. The sailors, as much as they can try, there's only so much human beings can do. And they need to be better taken care of with better equipment, better munitions, better ships at the same time. And it's expensive. There is no, as a good friend and shipmate, a friend of mine, Tom Shugart, has said for years, there are no magic beans. We can't just throw these in the ground and we have a beanstalk to heaven. There ain't no solution like that. So It's going to be expensive. Anyone who has a boat understands that and very well. But if we would rather the bad guys be over there rather than over here, and we would want to continue to enjoy our freedoms and liberty, but most importantly, the prosperity that we've become accustomed to, the Navy is your best bet and your best investment. And we need to catch up on it. So that's what I was getting at.
I love what you said about how it costs you if you have a boat. You know that I went on a sailing adventure with the Scouts this past summer, and one of our co-captains said, "Yeah, when you've got a boat and you're sleeping, you're sitting there thinking, okay, what's breaking now?"
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I can only imagine in a naval capacity what that looks like. So for those of us in manufacturing who've been paying attention, we know American shipbuilding as a whole has declined dramatically. And then with naval shipbuilding in particular, like you say, we've kind of been eating the seed corn, right? So tell us about, what do we need to do to get back on track? What are the kind of those first steps?
Yeah, there's another large report because I've tried to, it's very complex and all of the elements are interconnected. And I've talked about like a reduction gear where you've got some parts are spinning really, really fast and others are just gears are moving slow, but they're all connected in the reduction gear and they're all turning the shaft at a set speed. That's kind of what's happening here with the United States' maritime industrial base. About 5 years ago, when I joined Heritage, coming out of the Navy, I kind of knew I knew a fair amount about the health of the commercial industrial base, but I didn't have a breadth and the depth that was needed. So every time I was trying to make a recommendation about, well, we need to bring more capacity into the naval shipbuilding from the commercial into, there wasn't any. So I kept, everywhere I was looking, the problem didn't get better, it got worse. And so it's the solutions complex by necessity. And so I wrote about that with a paper with the same title to try to explain all of the complexities of how to revive our America's shipbuilding. We knew we needed capital investment, a lot of money to move into the waterfront. Some of that, you can see some of my influence on the Ships for America Act and the president's executive order on this. And that's happening, but that's not good enough. You also have to attract shipyard workers and the merchant mariners who are going to crew the ships. And we have to have incentives for that as well. We have to simplify their training and certification. Shipyard workforce is moving too fast, coming in and leaving. So you have to find a better way. And there's a lot of technical ways to do this, to embrace a very robust turnover of workforce at the waterfront. And doing business the same way ain't going to work either for the shipbuilders, naval as well as commercial. So we have to kind of embrace our workforce as it is. But you can't just do that. You have to have the shipyard getting cranes and equipment and getting the workers. We also don't have enough naval architects, the designers, and go in a great deep dive on that. Then the next thing is we don't have the ships. We need ships today, and we can't build the ships that we need today fast enough. So we're going to have to leverage our overseas partners, our allies, Japan, South Korea, trusted, signed defense treaty partners with a lot of common national interest. That's important. And they're making strategic investments here to do that. But they've got ships. So do the Greeks in LNG. And then finally, we've got to be able to operate differently too for the Navy. But I'll hold it right there.
Okay, so you referred to numbers, and we talk about the Navy itself. Where are we at? What are the numbers you think we need to have? Where are we today? And what does that gap look like?
Yeah, so in the first book, it's this one back here, U.S. Naval Power in the 21st Century. I'm a nuke, so there's an equation in there that answers exactly this question. And it's deeply informed first by understand the threat. In this case, China, little case, Russia. But you got to think of both of them. Sure. And so understand the threat. Then you have to understand where are you going to be called to operate. So understand the environment and also the seasonal part of that. You don't have to be up in the high north in the middle of the wintertime. That's just not necessary. But you do need to be there at other times of the year. So that gives you a balancing. So that goes into the equation. We know that we're going to need more ships. There's no way around it. For the size of the threat from China, and then add in the Russians moving around the world, and then understanding where politically the Navy is going to be called on to act without putting at risk deterring the Chinese, you're going to need a fleet of about 575 ships. Now, that's not all destroyers. That's not all aircraft carriers and submarines. There's about 150 or so of those that are large unmanned vessels that would travel with a destroyer and carry a lot of additional weapons. And the idea is you'd use these unmanned vessels as an augment, an arsenal. So you don't have to go reload the destroyer as frequently, because now you've got 5 of these unmanned vessels with missiles on them as well. And it also makes it harder for the Chinese or the Russians to target it. That's also part of it. You complicate their problem set.
Right.
There's a deep dive on that. We have an aging fleet too. So we need to get submarine tenders. These are the ships that keep the submarines in good shape, reload the torpedoes downrange. They also refuel it too with diesel, because nuclear submarine still has a diesel generator as a backup. And you're going to want to keep that fuel too. So these submarine tenders are necessary, and they are well past their service age. We have 2, both in Guam today. And we also probably need some new classes of ships. I make a strong case for bringing back escort carriers. In World War II, these were the carriers, little baby carriers, that we would use to move aircraft around. We also use and do maintenance, but we also use them to provide air defense around the battle group. You had the strike carriers, which would launch the heavier and have a lot of the munitions to go in and go sink the enemy or go to do a lot of the land attacks.
Yep.
That was conceptually. And so we're kind of at a point now where we're going to need something like that, because we can't build Ford-class aircraft carriers fast enough, and we have to diversify where we're building. And which is another theme I kind of want to get to, is when the Navy and Congress come up with what they're going to plan to build and pay for ships, part of that needs to be an investment plan for building out industrial capacity too. And that's not in the equations usually. So sorry, I kind of went down a rabbit hole there for you. Sorry.
No, I mean, it's all critical. And we've got kind of this multi-pronged difficulty. You talked about the maintenance, and we hear those horror stories of our ships coming in all rusty. That's a piece. But yeah, the shipbuilding, obviously, in this world we're talking about in the manufacturing realm is central. When we talk about getting to that size of Navy again, what's the timing you're looking for? And then what's the capacity we have that we can deliver today? And then what's the additional that we need?
Yeah, because we neglected the Navy and the shipbuilding for far too long. And this is not one person's misjudgment. It's Congress, it's the White House, it's the Navy. They're all guilty of where we are today, and nothing that they do today or tomorrow is going to change the fact that the Navy is reducing in size of ships. It's unavoidable at this stage to its nadir, its lowest point, before things start to turn around, of about 280 ships in January of 2027. That's when the Chinese are set to be prepared for war, by the way. So we're waving our weaknesses like red bloody meat in front of a very hungry lion or panda bear, which pandas, I guess, are vegetarian, so maybe it's wheats or got to think of some better analogy for the Chinese panda bear or dragon.
There you go.
But I think you get my point. We're weakest when they're strongest. Bad place to be at if you want to deter war. So the timeline on this is it takes several years to build a Navy warship, and they are robust, expensive, very rugged platforms for a reason. Those standards are written in blood. So we need to build unmanned vessels, and we have to build them at number and at speed. So the only way we're going to get firepower at sea, which is what matters to the Chinese, is we're going to have to get creative in using unmanned vessels while we continue to speed up and grow the production of the traditional destroyers, submarines, aircraft carriers. But let's assume that we're successful and we deter the Chinese, beyond this decade. That doesn't mean the threat's gone. So we continue to have to invest and get our Navy to where it needs to be. And so that 575 number that I gave you was looking at realistically, can we get to a number like that and sustain it beyond 2035? But inside the book is also how do we deter the Chinese now? How do we cover all our bases and able to fight a war successfully against the Chinese, but ideally do operate in a way that deters them first and foremost? And that math was deeply informed. It was a very, let's just say it's a very in-depth Excel spreadsheet, as engineers love, and
Right.
informed by a lot of exquisite insight. So it's not just stuff that I created. Getting there, we are well beyond. That was done in late 2020, 2021. So we are now 4 years behind where we should have been. Again, I go back to the neglect and the apathy of the past. The luxuries of the past are now the necessities of the present, and we don't have the time to deliver those necessities.
What do you say to people, you got the naysayers who say, "Oh, those people claiming we need that are just the saber rattlers wanting to get us into unnecessary wars or police the world. We don't really need that." What's the reply to that kind of counter argument?
Yeah, we may not want to, we may not enjoy or want to have a war, but the Chinese do.
Yeah.
They feel like they deserve and are entitled to the preeminence in the world, and they're not afraid of taking it.
Yep.
And I can't see Americans just kind of rolling over and ceding territory, resources, people, and prosperity and our liberties just because it's easy, because it isn't. Eventually, it comes to your doorstep. So, yeah, we may feel that way. The Chinese don't.
Yep. That being said, I'm a huge fan of what America did in World War II, and obviously, we were kind of caught with our pants down leading into that as well. Now, you talk about as part of your challenge to America to rebuild the Navy is also rebuilding civilian shipbuilding as well. How do those two play together?
Yeah, so when I got out of the Navy, I had going back to as a young lieutenant in 1999 to 2001, I was a flag lieutenant for 7th Fleet Admirals, based in Japan. One of the biggest numbered fleets and very active, let's put it that way. But my boss was a surface warfare officer who knew a lot about shipbuilding. And whenever we would travel and whenever we were on the flagship and we pull into a port, he always made sure that we went and talked to the port facilities folks, the nearest shipbuilder, shipyard, and also that we talked to the ship owners, the people doing the shipping. Because what he was concerned about, making sure that his fleet had access to, were the places where we would have to go if a ship got broken, got hit by bad guy missiles, and also if we needed to move supplies around, who's got the shipping. And so he impressed upon me this importance. So I already knew we were pretty bad 25 years ago.
Yeah.
And we were on a trajectory of worse, and we are pretty worse. Just to give a scope of the problem, our economy has grown over 400% since the late 80s, when the last assessment of what's the shipping required to sustain a wartime economy, and that was during the Cold War, was 650 ships. We have realistically that could meet that need. This is international shipping. So this isn't like intercoastal or barges, Jones Act. This is a fleet for international shipping. We have about maybe 78 today, maybe, and they're very old. So there's nowhere near the task. And the need's upwards of about 2,500 ships if you just did a linear comparison. So it's a pretty big problem. The commercial shipping is critical. The Chinese know, and they have targeted this sector because they effectively today control the terms of trade. They've got a whole global network of ports. They can confound slow services for ships like refueling, handling of cargo. They can also slow the handling and movement of the ships of these ports, from berth to berth. They also control the shipbuilding. There are almost over half of the tonnage and ships out there are built in China. And that means that our allies like the Greeks, the French, the Italians, who have large flag fleets as well, they're doing maintenance in China, not at home. So the Chinese are very much in control of the terms of trade. And that's a very dangerous place to be, because they can basically economically blackmail us to make decisions that are not in our best interest, just to keep the lights on and the grocery store shelves stocked. Got a little taste of this, not by design, but we got a taste of what that world's like during COVID recovery.
We did.
People remember the barren shelves and everything. So commercial shipbuilding, ship sector is even worse than the naval. And it's very urgently needed to be addressed.
Yeah, if I'm getting my statistics right, I think, is it correct that for all of global shipbuilding, American shipbuilding is now less than half a percentage point?
Yes. Might even
I
be
mean,
less than that. It's very small.
people
It's really,
that's what people don't understand is just
yeah.
the staggering nature of the mountain we have to climb.
Yeah. The Philippines are actually, I think they're the fourth largest. So the Philippines is actually now bigger shipbuilder than the United States. A
Yeah.
former territory, a former, outpost of the US. Now that outpost is much bigger shipbuilder than the United States with its
Yeah.
large navy. So
But that being said, you referred to it earlier that one element of our comeback has to be making use of those allies, right?
absolutely. On one level, it's happening right now is investment. So the Japanese and the South Koreans have lost a lot of market share in the global competition to the Chinese. They see the United States as a strategic investment, but very shrewd one to grow their market share.
Yeah.
The commercial fleet, like the U.S. Navy, is also aging, and there's also new standards of the type of fuel they use. The decision on that's not really fully set yet, so people have held back their orders, which is making the problem worse. The demand for new commercial ships is going to exceed global capacity in the next couple of years. It's already starting, but if you want to be positioned to take advantage of demand outpacing supply and you want to start growing your capacity to build ships and take back some of that market share from China, this is the place to invest. This is the time to do it. And so they are.
Yep.
We'll see how things play out.
There is some substantial investment in the Philippines that we're involved in now, right?
Yes. So the 2000, so Hanjin, which is South Korean shipbuilder, went bankrupt, and Cerebus worked with others, were able to prevent the Chinese takeover of the port, the shipbuilder. And today, actually, yes, the South Koreans are back again, and they're growing the shipbuilding in Subic Bay. And it's also a transshipment hub as well. It used to be a naval base, but it's a commercial port now. Does also some naval work as well for the U.S. Navy, light maintenance and repairs, and it'll probably grow in that. So absolutely. So there's investment here, expertise and experience in naval design, new modern techniques, bringing that to the United States. But then there is like the Philippines. I would also say South Korean ports, also in India. These are places where U.S. Navy ships, like logistic ships, have gone and had significant repairs done and maintenance. Because again, we don't have the capacity here in the United States to cover all the needs.
Got it. Now, obviously, we're still in kind of early days with the Trump administration. You've talked about like the SHIPS Act, some of those things that we need to get moving. How is the administration doing? What do they need to step up?
Yeah. I would have had higher expectations that the maritime team would have been in place much earlier. It was hardy to see, the first team that was fully manned up at the White House was the shipbuilding office. And this was when Mike Waltz was the national security advisor to the president. He's now the ambassador to the UN. That shipbuilding office was disestablished and reduced in size. There's two alumni of that are over in the Office of Management and Budget. Very important office for an expensive endeavor. So smart move, but we lost a lot of the other connective tissue to like Department of War now, Department of State, Department of Commerce, and the Department of Homeland Security for Coast Guard on this issue, and the Department of Transportation for the Maritime Administration. So we don't have a strong, until we get all the players in place, you're not going to have the captains of change. So we don't have a maritime administrator. We don't have a Navy shipbuilder. It's the Research, Development, Acquisition Secretary. That there's not even someone named for that yet. And we're getting close to a year since the election. But I am very optimistic about what's coming on the Maritime Action Plan, which is one of the tasks that the president gave in his executive order back in April. And this plan is supposed to provide, and lay out incentives for investment, things like maritime prosperity zones. So that plan should be coming forward. So that's good. And I have reason to believe very soon we'll have people in place, leadership roles to execute the president's plan for this maritime industrial revival. So by Christmas, that should all be in place. On the legislative side, I remain very confident. The bill, again, I was involved at the genesis going back 4 years ago when we started a small group of experts that then became this legislative package. By the way, the executive order that I was talking about, that's very much in line with the Ships for America Act by design. So you don't want to wait for the legislation. Let's start doing what we can through executive order. And that legislation is bicameral, bipartisan, and it works. It's not perfect, but it'll work. And we can adapt over time. That bill remains to be very popular. I think if you were to do a roll call and vote on it, it would pass. I also have every expectation that before the end of the year, it'll go back to the floor and for hopefully debate and vote before Christmas.
Okay.
I might be a little over optimistic on that, but this is, I ask frequently, like, where is it now? And I keep hearing, reasons to be confident.
Yeah. Well, certainly something for folks watching this to get themselves involved in. Contact your congressmen and senators and let them know that you're interested in making this happen, right?
Absolutely.
One last question on the kind of manufacturing end. It's not that we're without shipbuilding capacity or shipyards. Are there modern manufacturing methods that can help us out, or are there advanced manufacturing things that we can do to close that gap faster?
Yeah. So the first deep, heavily researched product that came out was, and it became the cover or the title name for the project, called A Revolution in Shipping. So the best way to answer your question is to kind of think of it as the analogy of like a cocktail. A lot of different ingredients. They have to be in the right proportions and be mixed together so that it actually is, a tasty cocktail. If you don't get the proportions right, it's not good. Or you get sick and you have a bad headache the next day. So you got to get the cocktail balance just right. And that is a combination of techniques and technologies that exist. Yeah. It wasn't any fantasy stuff. The most fantasy to some people is the one of the key elements is small modular nuclear reactors. Putting them on large container ships or even large LNG carriers, rather than using the off gas to propel the ship, you use that excess energy when you're at sea to keep it cool. And so that's more product to market. It's actually very cost effective. You can steam faster, but then also dirigibles, heavy lift balloons, basically moving TEU containers for ships that are offshore, feeder vessels. So you can, as well, that would go meet these large ships offshore to move cargo into smaller ports, using drones, repackaging and big data analytics, very dynamic logistics management, things like Amazon's expeditionary warehousing concepts. Those folks were involved in some of this. Big data analytics, AI for supply chain, predictive, but also for movement of all these things come together. Yeah. And then mundane, but perhaps the most fundamental change, rethinking the steel TEU containers, rethinking about the materials, rethinking about how it, if you could break it down in like Lego bricks instead, where one factory puts all the stuff into like a Lego brick thing that is the TEU container today, but then 1/3 of it actually needs to go inland, 100 miles inland to a factory. Well, you can break that off and use the dirigible that meets the ship, 30, 60 miles offshore, flies it right to the destination. There's a business case for that. It's a little cost prohibitive right now. And the dirigible is the best way to go on that. The other thing about that is you got a lot of environmental concerns in ports, very necessarily so. But it's also wickedly expensive to dredge, do earth movement, buy a lot of massive new infrastructure, either to take an old port that you want to modernize and grow it to handle the biggest container ships. Better is if you can just do modest modifications and updates and tie into an offshore, more intermodal, multimodal kind of construct.
Mhm.
This is America's potential comparative advantage. And it's also a very economical way to vastly grow the economics that are involved in trade and wickedly grow the amount of workforce. Laborers like stevedores handling cargo, truck drivers, you diversify it, and you actually don't have to have as much long haul trucking. You can actually shorten it down significantly. Less traffic congestion on the roads, less backlogs waiting for trains, less fees as your cargo sits on the pier. All these things are fundamentals of what makes good logistics. And that's what this is. And I tried to get to Elon Musk at one point in time. I was very close about a year and a half ago, about one degree of separation.
Oof.
And
Yep.
because what he did with SpaceX got my attention. They basically said, I got an idea for a rocket that'll make sense. The reusable one. We're all familiar with.
Mhm.
And the government said, it'll never work. You got to do it this way. And he said, I'm
Right.
not going to do that. So he went off and he did it. And then now they're contracting massively because it works and
Yeah.
it makes good business sense. So I was trying to find, and it's going to come from someone in America who is not in shipping. It's going to be someone who might be like in the Amazon CEO first starting off
Mhm.
selling his books. It's going to start with someone who sees the opportunity, can bring the cocktail of those technologies together and make it work. It's doesn't have to be someone who's in shipping and shipbuilding now to make that happen. But the
Yeah.
vision is
Yeah.
there, the math makes sense, the industrial plan to deliver on it, it's also known. It's just a matter of now we got to get the capital moving and we got to get breaking ground. We get cutting steel.
Yeah, and we're behind, so
Yeah.
no better time to start than the present, right?
Yes.
And I will say this about my audience, they're very well, uh, knowledgeable about all of supply chain, and,
Oh yeah.
they also like a well-mixed cocktail, a lot of them, so you're speaking right to them.
Sound like my crowd.
Perfect. Well, Brent, any last thoughts before we wrap up?
We are in very tense times overseas. As a Navy guy, and again, growing up in Asia, my number one kind of pastime, professional pastime, is all things China.
Yep.
The things that I've seen, if I look at it comprehensively, the economics, the Chinese Communist Party leadership, the way their military behaves, and my friends who actually operate, they're not just all Americans, but my fellow seafarers out there, they're on a path to confrontation. And so everything that we do, building up and hardening our economy, building our military up, and unifying, behind, into the nation, criticism's fine, but we need to unify. That's the message that's going to cause the Chinese to say, yeah, this is not the time to pick on the Americans. Well, let's hit pause.
Got it. Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate the insights you brought.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Well, I think, that went even better than I expected, except, obviously the news isn't good. So, Brent Sadler brought us some, sobering news, but stuff we've all got to hear. Fortunately, he's got some great next steps, that we can help promote. Do get a hold of your representative, your senator, let them know that the Ships for America Act is important to you. Brent has a book called US Naval Power in the 21st Century, a New Strategy for Facing the Chinese and Russian Threat. I've got a link to that in the show description. So, check that out, educate yourself. This is critical stuff, folks. So, I've been wanting to talk about it forever. There it is. Now you know the facts, act accordingly. This is Jim Vinoski signing off. Before I go, we've got a great show for you next week. We're going to do better. We keep knocking them out of the park, do better with every show. And next week's is no different. I've got Scott Pieper talking about the money side of industry, of manufacturing. He's got a show himself, and he's an expert on investment. And we're going to dive into it and talk about what needs to happen there. So tune in next Tuesday. We'll be back with another great show. In the meantime, Jim Vinoski signing off. So long.
Thanks for tuning in to Manufacturing Talks with Jim Vinoski. Watch for new episodes dropping every Tuesday. And don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe.